Chapter 3 of A Diamond in the Rough by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 3, in which a plot is hatched against John Marsh. "You're a nice-looking object, you are," said Mr. Wise Sr. as his hulking son Moses slouched into the house after the mix-up with Fred King. The Wise family was at supper, Jake himself being in the act of carving a rather tough steak, while the three little Wises sat around the board in a state of great expectation, each secretly hoping he would get the biggest piece, and Mrs. Jake was pouring the tea. "What's happened to you?" continued the head of the house as Moses flung his cap into a convenient corner and sneaked into his chair. "Got hurt," replied Moses ungraciously. "You did you? Well, you ain't got no business to get hurt. I'll see you're in the woodshed after supper." The significance of the final sentence caused Moses to grow pale. "Fred King licked me, if you want to know," he said sullenly. "Fred King?" snarled Wise Sr. with an ominous glitter in his eye. "That whelp!" with a hoarse roar. "I only wish I'd been boss of the screen room and he worked there." And Jake wagged his head forbiddingly. "I'd have taken the hide off him." From which it may easily be understood that Jake Wise for some reason did not have any great love for Fred King. "You ought to be big enough to put it all over that hound," went on Mr. Wise as he helped his eldest hopeful to the smallest piece of steak. "Maybe I am if I got a fair show." "Didn't you get a fair show?" "No, I didn't. He struck me when I wasn't looking." "He did he?" snorted Jake, beginning to feel a sort of sympathy for his son. "Give me the particulars." Moses, who knew his father like a book, began to see a gleam of hope ahead, and with a view of turning his parents' anger away from himself, proceeded to give a highly varnished account of the affair down by the river. Needless to say, he presented himself as the victim of an unprovoked assault. "And King jumped on you just 'cause you wanted to walk home with that Marsh girl, is that it?" "That's it, Dad." "If you can't handle him, I'll take the first chance and lick him myself," said Jake Wise after swallowing the greater part of a large cup of tea at a gulp. "I wish you'd fix him so Annie Marsh would give him the shake." "Maybe I will. So she talks to him, does she?" "Yes, she does," in a tone which would imply that Moses regarded this as a real grievance. "What do you care? She ain't your only girl in this here village." "She's the best looking, and dresses the nicest, too." "Yeah," snarled his father. "I ain't got no use for nothing connected with John Marsh. He's proud and stuck up." "That's right, Jake," interposed the amiable spouse with a snap of the eye. "Mrs. Marsh don't think I'm good enough to associate with." "Who said so?" roared Jake, glaring at Mrs. Jake as if he scented fresh fuel for his ill humor to feed upon. "Well, I heerd so," answered Mrs. Jake vaguely. "Those Marshes make me sick," spluttered Jake as though he was the censor of the village. "They try to make out they're better'n other folks. John Marsh thinks himself too good to drop into the miners' retreat for a glass of beer a night. Has it brought to his house instead. He told Gummit, the landlord, the other day that his house was a curse to the village, that he was making drunkards of honest miners, and taking the bread out of their families' mouths. I go there regularly, and I don't take the bread out of your and her kid's mouth, now do I, Mrs. Weiss?" "Oh, dear no," Mrs. Jake hastened to reply. "The idea." "There," and Jake brought his hand down on the table as if he clinched the argument in the right way. "Where's my hat?" he asked as he rose from the table. "Where you left it, I suppose," answered Mrs. Jake. "Where'd I leave it?" "Don't know. Are you going out?" "Yes, I'm going out. What'd you suppose when I asked for my hat? That I was going to bed?" with some sarcasm. "Here, you, Moses, just you hunt up my hat and be quick about it, or I'll take you on the woodshed and dust your jacket for you as I intended." Moses got a hustle on himself, and was so fortunate as to find his father's hat under his own. Jake Wise clapped it on his head, lighted his dirty stamp of a pipe, and walked out of the door, making a beeline for the miners' retreat, the eyesore of the mining village. The cracker boss was an early bird at the dram shop, and this gave him the opportunity of a long and confidential chat with Gummit, the proprietor, for whom he had considerable liking. It seems there had been some talk among the better people of the village of requesting Mr. Gummit, a beetle-browed Englishman, to remove to a more congenial locality, and Gummit naturally resented this interference with his rights. He was making money and didn't want to move. "You can lay it all to John Marsh," said Jake Wise, wagging his head sagely. "He's a wiper," said Gummit, bringing his fist down upon the bar with a force that set the glasses upon it all of a jingle. He meant viper, but unfortunately Gummit's language was not of the first order. "What right has he got going round setting people agin me? That's what I want to know," asked the Englishman with a look of virtuous indignation. "He ain't got no right," said Jake Wise, pouring out a fresh glass of whiskey for himself and then forgetting to pay for it. "Of course he ain't. If the miners want to come in here for a glass of beer or something stronger, ain't they got the right to? I ask you." "Sure they have." "Ain't no business of mine if they spend more than they can afford over the bar. This here's America, where every individual is his own boss. They come in here of their own accord, don't they? I don't go out and drive 'em in the club, do I? This has been a free country, and I have my rights too, even if I did come from the other side, which I ain't ashamed of." "That's right," agreed Jake, emptying his glass. "Take another," said Gummit, pushing the bottle toward him. "It won't cost you nothing. I look on you as a friend. What would you advise me to do?" "If it was me, Gummit," said Jake in a confidential whisper as he poured out another dram, "I'd try to do something to get square with John Marsh." "How can I do it?" asked the proprietor of the retreat, looking hard at the cracker boss. "Are you willing to try?" said Wise, regarding the Englishman narrowly. "I'm willing to do anything that won't get found out. If you're game, I'm ready to help you," said Jake in a low tone. "I've got it in for John Marsh myself, and I'm only waiting for a chance to put it up to him." "Are you?" said the Englishman eagerly. "Then we'll join hands if you say so. Put 'em on a business if we can." The bargain was struck on the spot and sealed with another drink. "Have you got any plan?" asked Gummit. "I have." "What is it?" "He's put all his earnings into that fine cottage he lives up on the lane. You've seen it, haven't you?" "I have." "The insurance ran out today noon, and the letter he writ to the company to have it renewed never reached the post office." "Why not?" "'Cause I got a hold of it, see?" Jake Wise pulled an envelope out of his pocket, addressed to the William Penn Fire Insurance Company of Philadelphia, and showed Gummit the enclosures, an unsigned receipt, and a money order for the amount shown on it. "He ought to have registered that letter. That's where you was a fool. Now, if his house burns down tonight, he'll lose all, with the mortgage standing agin the land, which will wipe him out." "But his house ain't likely to burn down tonight," said Gummit. "Maybe not, unless you and me put a match to it." Gummit wasn't so thick he couldn't understand what the cracker boss was driving at, and it took his breath for a moment. "It's a state prison offense," he said in a hushed tone. "Not unless you get caught." Gummit regarded the proposition with some uneasiness. "What are the chances?" he asked. "I think it's easy," said Jake coolly. "Come into my parlor, and I'll let the old woman wait on the customers," said Gummit, leading the way. With a bottle of whiskey before them, they went over the scheme, and after an hour's confab, came to an agreement to put it into effect that night. Then the two rascals parted, to meet again at midnight. End of chapter 3.